for your garden. It will reduce soil compaction. Plants, their roots really need air in their soil. And typical gardening, you can't really avoid stepping on the soil, or if you had a row garden or a row farm, sometimes you have to step in between the crops, and that can compact soil and actually not make it so the roots can breathe as easily. So this way you're gardening from the outside of the bed and outside of where the food's actually growing in the soil. Plants can actually be spaced a little bit closer together. Because you don't, like I said, you don't need to step in between plants. You're able to reach inside, and you don't have to have as many pathways. It reduces the amount that you're going to be weeding as well. Because you're using soil from an outside source, it's really healthy soil usually. Pick and choose where you're getting your soil from. And because it's healthier, it's going to have less weeds in it. And you're actually going to be able to have the soil further away from the grass that may have tons of weeds growing in it already. And especially on these vacant lots in Philadelphia, there's a lot of weeds growing in the lots. They also are able to drain some of the excess moisture out of the beds, and sometimes that can be a problem in a garden that you have that's just growing right on the ground. If it rains really hard, sometimes it can actually, wash some of the plants away. This is a way that the water will drain out instead of just staying in there and pulling the plants out. You can also control the soil conditions a lot more easily because you're not dealing with the soil that's there. You're not having to worry about it having an imbalance in any way that might be really good for one plant but not for another. This way you can kind of control more easily the soil. So again, you're also able to control how much you're watering and how much water you're using, because you're not going to have to use as much water. You're not going to have to use as much fertilizer or compost, because they're only going to need to be applied to the beds and not the whole entire area, which is really great. Studies have actually shown that raised beds are going to produce anywhere between 1.4 and 2 times as many fruits and vegetables per square foot than it would be if you were just planting right in the ground. And then also some advantages for you for raised bed gardening. It brings you closer to the garden. You're not sitting on the ground having to garden. You're able to do it from a comfort of a path. It's easy to reach into. You're going to be pulling less weeds, you're going to be bending less, and you're going to bring more order and form to your garden. So you're going to be able to really separate plants that don't grow well together. Like tomato plants and pepper plants don't typically do very well in the same bed, so this way you can really keep everything organized and separate. And you're also going to be able to extend your growing season a little bit longer, so you're going to be able to produce a higher yield for that growing year. The beds, because you're bringing in soil and you're able to put them in a sort of closed container, the soil actually warms up faster than the soil in the ground does, so you're able to start planting a little bit earlier. And then you're also to be able to remain a little more productive throughout the fall, because the soil will also stay warm in the fall when things start to get colder. So just some of the problems, because farming, no one said farming was easy all the time. With raised beds, they can be really hard to disassemble, so if you wanted to move them and you were using like cinder blocks or something instead of maybe lighter, like cedar is probably your best thing that you want to use, but it's really expensive. So a lot of times you can use anything that you can find, like cinder blocks, and like I said, that can be really heavy and it can be really difficult to move to another location if you needed to. For example, we're moving our lot because the city's taking this whole city block through eminent domain, so we have to move all of our beds. Because they're wood, it probably won't be too difficult, but we're going to want to bring as much soil as we can with us because it was expensive. It was something we put into the garden, so it can be harder to move. And it can be really expensive. Initially, it can be more expensive because you're going to have to spend more money, out front and outright to get the screws you need, the soil, the wood, the labor if you need help with it, and all that stuff that goes into it. But in the long run, once they're built, and if you are planning on keeping them in the same location, it makes a lot of sense. It's going to keep your costs lower year after year. So all you're really going to need to add to it is compost or more soil. And your seeds, obviously, too. So if you want to take a look at the handout for raised beds, this is just one way to do it. And they talk also in this handout about not just using wood, using some other options as well.
Well, my mother always used the pots, the big pots and everything. She used those out in the backyard.
The
big
what?
pots. Big flower pots, that's what she grows in, a big wide joint
Right.
for tomatoes and stuff.
Exactly.
And then she got the wire stuff for the tomatoes to hang on. The wire brush, the round joint, funnel.
Right. We have some right there. Is that what you're talking about? The cages?
Yeah, the cages. Yeah, that's what she used.
But the benefit here is you can actually have 48 plants going in a 4 foot by 12 foot. So she would need 48 pots, which are very expensive.
Yeah,
This ends up being a lot cheaper.
So it's really similar to growing in pots.
Yeah.
What he's saying will work because that's for somebody who don't want to go into the ground. You got a small area.
Yeah, because the backyard ain't that big.
If you got concrete on the back,
That's why it's got
and
concrete.
you can use a pot or you can use half a 55-gallon drum and cut it in half, turn it upside down, put soil, put a plant for people who are just starting. Maybe the cheapest way out right now to get started with it, and then you maybe want to move into the higher volume. That would work.
Right.
You know, unless you have a lot available. If you got a lot available, that's different.
Right.
Yeah, but we don't.
But she can still use that, like, but can she still, like, make those pots like this, even though she got concrete underneath?
You
If
can.
She can still do it like that, too, though.
The best way, especially if you're
Yeah,
going to do it
put
on
it on it.
concrete, if you look at, I mean, the handout talks more about doing it on a vacant lot or if you're doing it in a green space. But if you're doing it on a concrete surface, I think in that case it's really important to make sure you put that
base
weed
under it.
suppressing layer or something under it so that it can hold the soil a little bit better.
All you need is a hole in the pot so the water doesn't
Right.
So the drain.
So you need to make sure it
That's
it's
all
able
you
to
need.
Okay.
You can use plastic or whatever. As long as it rains
And it can drain.
And Home Depot
drains out.
sells the felt. I'm sure you use it. What is it? The liners. Right, which are used. We don't actually have them in our beds, and we've done okay without them. But if you were doing it on concrete, it might be a good idea to help keep things in.
There's
Okay.
nursery supply stores that are all online too, that have the corners. You know, all you have to do is stick the wood in them.
Right.
You know, and have, I mean, they sell the whole things, you know, not just doing it yourself.
Right.
But they sell the whole thing, you know, and you could, you know, if you want to go into that kind of expense, you know.
Right.
But, or they just sell the corners so that you can just put the wood in there and no nails.
That's a good point too. So not only could you do it the way it's shown in the example here, but you can buy edges at nurseries or at Home Depot or places like that, and if you have your wood, you could actually put
Just
them
stick
together that way.
Yeah, just stick the wood in it, you know.
I see they got a nice lot up in there, 64th Street and Market, across from Sears used to be.
I haven't seen it. Is it a vacant lot?
Yeah, but they got, it's a big area for them to grow their plants and everything up there. They're fruit and vegetables. It's right there, it's right up here on 64th Street, right past that shelter that's further up there.
Oh,
That's
okay.
a
Like
number
on the
door.
south
That's
side?
in Delaware County.
Yeah.
Right
Just
out
build it out.
Yeah, they also have a nice one, I guess, on 46th Street. Somewhere.
Yeah, the Mill Creek.
And then they also got a garden down in Eastwick by the airport. There's a lot of garden spots.
There's more than 200 of them now. So.
And I think what's really important when if this is something that you're really serious about and you really want to do is trying to network with those gardens who have a little more experience, especially if you're not as comfortable starting a garden. I mean, we're happy to help too, but it's really great. Like, I've reached out to them for help as well. So it's really great to get into like sort of the gardening network.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, you got some on 50.
So on the last page,
50 brand.
not of the handout, but of this section,
Okay.
the third page
And
with
you got them all
the drip
locations,
irrigation
but
system number 10.
all the locations.
And we don't use this, but it has a lot of advantages. So what drip irrigation means, there's a bunch of ways to do it. You can buy a drip irrigation system, or you can sort of make your own. And what that means is anything from taking a hose or PVC pipe, drilling holes into it or tacking holes into it, and making sure one end is stopped up, and then on the other end you're able to hook a hose up to it. So you might have to buy the nozzle, which are usually pretty cheap, and you can hook the hose up to it and just lay it in your garden beds. And there's a lot of advantages to do that. So you just turn your hose on and it actually comes out of those holes that you created in the hose or the PVC pipe or whatever you're using, whatever tube you're using to use as your drip system. So there's a lot of advantages to doing that. You're actually going to be using less water, so you'll be saving money if it's water coming from your house or your hose, or you're the one paying the bill for the water bill. And you're only actually going to be saturating the root zone, which is the only part of the plant that really, really needs the water. Especially when it gets really hot out and we're watering like how we water every day and we're hitting the leaves. Sometimes that can actually cause a burn effect on the leaves. So this way you're just targeting the roots and the source that really need the water. It also helps reduce evaporation. Another thing where it's sort of like we're wasting water because it's targeting just the roots in the bottom of the bed. It also helps reduce weed growth because you're only pretty much watering plants that need the water, and you're not utilizing or pushing water on weeds to help them grow. You're targeting it just on your produce plants. It's, like I said, it's economical. It's a pretty cheap way to water. And if you wanted to spend the extra money, and if you felt secure enough to do this, you could actually have, and if you have access to water, 24/7, you can actually use a timer. You can set a timer to your irrigation system. Again, if you feel like it's a safe, secure area, and then that way you can just turn on and off. So does anyone have any questions about irrigation or the drip systems or water access? So.
Can I just add something because I'm not sure if you're going to cover it? We were just given two 50-gallon tanks that we could actually put under a downspout. So the downspout that actually is dumping.
Where's the best place on your house is just wait for when it rains and see where it's coming down. If the one gutter is, your house is slanted a certain way, so that one gutter is collecting the most rain, put your barrel there. It's, sounds like a no-brainer, but sometimes you think, oh, I'll just put it outside somewhere. But it's really good
We're here.
The gutter.
So like when the fall and the winter come, would y'all just cover this up or y'all just leave it like this? Just leave the leave out?
We actually had, we went from Christmas, I guess, with herbs and collards.
You don't have to cover these up, no?
You can. We could actually start them a month early if we wanted to put a cover on them like a little hoop house. Plastic.
Yeah, so I didn't touch on the hoop house, but in the handout also it talks about a way to set yourself up for a hoop house. I think it's 8 and 9, steps 8 and 9 talk about it. And it has details about the type of PVC pipe you would want, how large you want it in comparison to your bed. And it's a really great way to not only keep your beds warmer in the early spring and the late fall, but it's a really great way to sort of protect them from any of the outside elements as well, such as squirrels or other animals that might get into your gardens, and insects and things like that as well. Now, Amy Laura talked about this on Monday a little bit, but it sounds like if you keep the hoop house up for more than, was it 5 months?
6 months.
6 months?
5 months.
It's considered a building,
Yeah, 6
so you have to make sure that you're able to take it off and on, unless you want to.
And believe me,
You don't wanna
they
put
don't have any hoop house or greenhouse pretty shit. So
Yeah, but it's
that would be the last thing I'd be worried about. But
just gotta say it. Okay, so we'll just touch briefly on actually planting vegetables and fruit. Because like I said, I think the best way to really learn is to just kind of get out there and do it. But when it comes to sort of our system or what we've tried to do, I really recommend square foot gardening. There's a book written out there called Square Foot Gardening, and I think it's like $40. It seems kind of steep, but if you and 4 people get together and buy it and share it, it's a really great book that goes through every single type of plant. And basically the concept of square foot gardening It's a systematic way to garden so that you're producing the greatest amount of produce on each square foot. I'm sure you can even get it on Amazon.com for pretty cheap too. They usually sell used books on there.
Is that in here?
No, I can send it out, but it's called Square Foot Gardening.
I read it.
And so that book talks about, and I'm kicking myself because I can't remember the author's last name, but his first name is Mel. I really recommend getting it. It's estimated that you're going to get 20%. You're going to get the same amount of produce you would get. I'm not framing this right. By only using 20% of the space that you would normally use to grow a certain type of produce, you'll be able to yield the same amount. So I'm still using 20% of the space you would typically use. It also talks a little bit about thinking outside the box. So a lot of times zucchini and plants that grow on vines, like cucumbers, you can actually force them to grow upwards as well. So you can save space that way too. If you have a fence around your whole block, or if you want to put up a small fence, it talks about easy ways to do that, cheap ways to do that, and which types of plants don't mind climbing things instead. But let me just go through just a few examples of what I mean by square foot gardening, because I think that'll help. So if you have a we'll do 8 by 8 foot. No, we'll do 4 by 8 foot. Because another thing that's really important, which I said when I was explaining what raised bed gardening meant, is you really don't want to make it any wider than 3 to 4 feet. And the reason for that is it's really hard to reach in past 3 or 4 feet. Past 2 feet. You can typically, walk around the perimeter and reach in about 2 feet.
Okay.
So you don't want to make it any bigger, because then you're going to end up stepping in your plants, and that'll, compact the soil. You could step on a plant, things like that can happen. So you typically want to keep it about 3 to 4 feet wide, and it can almost be as long as you want it. Like I said, ours are about 12 feet. I think just a little bit shy of 12 feet, but for this example, I'll just use 8. So, draw these lines. And I'm not an artist, so I apologize. Okay, so that's roughly each one of these blocks represents a square foot, right? So, for example, for lettuce, you can fit about 4 heads of lettuce per each square foot. And that's a lot if you think about an entire row. And a really great way to do this, typically in row gardening, you end up using a lot more seeds than you would in square foot gardening. Because in row gardening, usually people just sprinkle seeds throughout the entire row, and then they go through and thin out, pull out the weakest ones so the bigger ones can grow. In this case, you can plant about 2 or 3 seeds, or 3 or 4 small seeds in each hole, and you know that you can just do it that way. You're using less seeds, and you're gonna be pretty much guaranteed that you'll be able to grow 4 in there instead of, sort of up in the air. You're also gonna want to do, for example, with tomato plants, you really only want to do 1 every about 2 feet, right, Melvin? 1 tomato plant. So this here is about 2 feet, right? 2 by 1 foot. So you're going to put your tomato plant right here. So the book, like I said, it'll help you with almost every single scenario of, whatever type of produce that you'd like. I think carrots you can do up to 24 per square foot. You can do 12 per square foot, things like that. So it's a really great way to also keep track of how much you're growing. And this is important if you wanted to go for profit and really try to optimize a yield. You can predict better results. So I've actually written down on this, it got cut off a little bit, but on the top of the soil fact sheet, I wrote down the contact information for the Penn State Extension. Now what they do is soil testing for you as well. So if you wanted to get your soil tested, it's probably not a bad idea on some of these vacant lots, because even though you're bringing in fresh soil, or you want to bring in, really healthy soil, you never know. You never know what you're growing on, and if, God forbid, you're planting something that maybe roots a little deeper than something else. You just want to get your soil tested to make sure there's nothing in there that's too outrageous. So they're a really great resource because you can go there and pay $10 to pick up. You can go to Penn State Extension. It's down on 2 Penn Center Plaza. It's right here in Philadelphia. And you can pick up your kit for $10, and what that'll do is include shipping, and you'll take your sample. It'll tell you how to do it really specifically, like how to get the best sample, and then you'll actually send it up to Penn State. They'll test it for everything, and then they'll send you the results and what you can do to help make your soil healthier if it needs to be, or if it's dangerous. And this is also might be a really good idea before you purchase a lot, if that's something you're really concerned about. To just go and get it tested and see if you're comparing between 2 different lots. Like maybe you want the one that doesn't have certain contaminants in it, and another one does.
And you said that was Penn State
Extension. And sort of to go off on the Penn State Extension, they're just a really great resource. They're pretty inexpensive with the sort of help they give to for-profit farmers. And I think I also included, at the bottom of the raised bed page, their link for their food for profit workshop. It's one class, or 1 day of class.
The script for going, is it Mel Bartholomew?
Yes, that's it. Mel Bartholomew. Not Bartholomew. Yeah, and it's a really great book. I have a copy of it. It's really great. But the Penn State Extension Food for Profit Workshop, it's $40, which sounds kind of steep, but that's going to cover your registration, your materials, and then also lunch for that day too. So
and this is at 2 Penn Center. This is at the extension.
I think this is Extension. That's one of their headquarters, or one of their offices. And I think the workshop, if you go to that website, you can see what dates they're having it and the locations as well. And I think they're here in Philadelphia.
Could you tell me near the website?
It's on the bottom of the How to Build a Raised Bed Garden page. I wrote it in there. Yeah, technically page 2. And then the soil testing is on the top of the soil packet. So I just included the soil packet. I'm not going to go over all of the facts on it, but it's just a way to help minimize your risk of soil contamination in urban gardens. It has a lot of really great information. It's very detailed, and it's good stuff. So if you have a chance to read that too, it might be helpful with picking your lots out as well. So Melvin, do you have another way, just to go back to optimizing growth on these, on your raised beds. Something that Melvin actually taught me was how to crack collards, and we sort of talked about this before, but he can talk about it.
The word is crap.
Crap, sorry.
Yeah.
Crap collards.
It's like anybody ever did tobacco? No. Nobody ever did tobacco. So I guess you say everything have a leaf. That's it.
What that means, some of the resources to be able to learn how to farm. Like I said, I think, and Melvin taught me this, the best way to learn is just try it. Try everything, trial and error. The nice thing is, I talked about not wanting to waste seeds. The seeds are really cheap too. You can get them for really low cost, and we'll talk more about some of those costs tomorrow, but trial and error, I think, is some of the best ways to learn. But I'm just going to talk briefly about sort of keeping your garden or urban farm legal in the city. So that's on this next page. So I gave you a handout for this also. And I think this was talked, Amy Laura yesterday talked about this, but I really wanted to just go over it again. So with zoning, gardens and urban farms are allowed in most residential areas, residential areas and commercial areas. They're not really in center city districts. Oh, I'm sorry, this one. Register and apply for all the following to make your urban farm entry. Yeah, there you go.
Oh, okay.
I've listed in this also sort of where they're not allowed. However, they always make exceptions. You can apply for special exception permit if they're not. So some of the prerequisites also, if you're planning on doing this for profit, you really want to get registered as a business. It's going to protect you. It's going to protect your consumer.
You have a license to sell,
You'll have a license to sell.
retail or wholesale with this business. You want to sell, and you have a reason.
Do you have any idea of cost for that?
We'll go into more detail with that tomorrow, but
Yo!
Dad, don't.
He probably texting his girlfriend.
I think he's texting.
Probably texting his girlfriend.
Yeah, he can't hear nobody. With that noise, music, he can't hear nobody.
Only his own ears.
And it's
I
not
think
like
that's a
she
PPA
can't see.
person.
I thought she was waiting for the light to change. I'm wait, just sit there.
No, but he's texting somebody right there.
So anyways, you're going to want to get your business registered. I recommend going to the IRS website that I provided. That'll give you some more details about how to apply for your EIN number if you can't make it tomorrow, and that's fine. But I'll go into a lot more detail about that tomorrow. Again, this will protect you in the future. You can also register as a sole proprietorship if you have a social security number. I recommend doing the employee identification number. It keeps you and your business totally separate if anything was to happen. But you can do the sole proprietorship if you'd like. The City of Philadelphia also requires a tax account number, and you can apply for that via the website that I provided as well on the handout. As Amy Lar talked about yesterday, the commercial activity license, that's something that you're going to need to get also if you are a for-profit venture. If you're not for-profit, I don't think you need to get it, but if you're going for-profit, it's either a $300 one-time lifetime fee, or you can do $50 each year. And again, that information is provided in further detail in the handout. So I've also provided a link to the Philadelphia website that can help you with starting a new business. What's really great about the philly.gov website is it literally can walk you through every single step of starting a new business, and it's free. Unlike some of the other sources out there, might charge you a fee to help you start a business. But the philly.gov is really great with sort of helping you cross your T's and dot your I's with registering your business. So you'll need to get a vendor licensing. Community gardening and market farming are allowed, but you'll need that use registrant permit from the city, and that is mostly so the city can keep track of how many farms and urban gardens there are in the city. It's a new thing they're trying to do. It's sort of part of our Philadelphia culture, not to pay $125 to just get something registered in the city. They're not going to take it away from you if not, but basically that helps with processing
But
and
this is
helping
only
with the
if you're
database.
going to be commercial.
This is either if you're, I think unless you are a registered nonprofit, you have to pay that. And then that means if you're gardening with a church, they're technically a nonprofit, so you don't have to. But
It's
a
just being just to garden. Do we need any of this stuff?
if it's on a lot, yes. If it's like your backyard garden, not really.
But you're not selling. Are you?
No, you have to do this even if you are community gardening.
If you are just gardening like we are,
They're asking you to do this.
we're not paying the fee. We're giving away free food. We give away 800 pounds of food.
We're also,
We're not
we're
giving
also
this
a
to you.
nonprofit.
We are protesting.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what we do, with
Yeah.
what we grow. That's pretty much what
I think it's a way of the city, for the city also to get that vacant lot number down. I think it's like a smart way for the city to do it. Should they be charging community gardens $125? I don't think so, but I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to keep track of people who are doing good on these vacant lots.
Now, on the other hand, if you do it the right way, you can go to the Department of Commerce, you can go to SBA.
Right.
They-
We'll
if
go
you-
over this smart too, yeah.
Okay, but if you're eligible, you can get up to $25,000 loan to get it going. Now, if
For
you do that
small
in the name of a
businesses.
corporation, and they don't make you sign personally for it, which they usually try to, then that'd be actually a very safe way to start a community garden.
And that's why I was saying it's important to get, I think, the EIN number, an employee identification number, rather than go sole proprietorship, because it's keeping you and your business totally separate. Even if it is just a community garden, but maybe you're selling produce, even if it is not for profit, it's still just a good way to keep yourself protected.
Okay, so you're saying that what is commercial on that? You still have to pay.
They're asking, I think, starting August 1 of this year.
$300.
No, that's just if you're going commercial.
Okay, so if
If you're
not,
selling the produce,
if
yeah.
you're not doing commercial, you don't have to put out any money.
No, you don't have to put out that $300 or the $50
Okay,
for the,
but okay,
for
if
the
you're not,
CAO.
but if you're not going commercial, you just have your own garden. You don't have to.
Even if it's in a lot.
So there's
Right,
two
but
that's
different
not a lot.
there's two different
Yeah.
fees we're talking about here. One
Okay.
is if you're I'll start
You can grow on your
commercial
own
from the other
property, there's no charge. But if you want to call your property like we have a community garden,
Right.
they're going to start to tax you.
Yes, it's basically a tax for their database system, which is the $125. The only way to get out of that number is if you're not for profit. Like you're a registered nonprofit or a church or entity that is not for profit registered in the IRS in their
I
eyes.
said, okay, then they don't have to pay.
They wouldn't have to pay. But if you were doing a community garden, you know,
myself.
your block,
On
whoever,
your
you
lot.
own
Then we
a
have
lot,
to pay.
you have to pay to register. You'll go in a database that, oh, okay, that lot is a community garden. Now this commercial activity license is separate from that number. So you've paid your $125 because we're going to call you an urban farm or a community garden, and now you're thinking, well, I want to sell this produce for profit. That's when you have to get the commercial activity license, and that's either $300 one time or $50 per year.
And if you really grow and you put a greenhouse on it, and it's up more than 6 months, and they want to call it a permanent structure, there's another tax.
You have to just be aware of these costs and figure out if this is something that we want to take on, if we're willing to take on, if we think, you know.
So I think one of the things, they talk a lot about renting from the city, and then you have to come up with insurance, liability.
Really cool things about growing produce on these vacant lots for profit is all you need to sell produce. If you're selling it uncut, you know, you're not chopping it up or preparing it in any way, you're just selling it as fresh produce from the ground. The only type of licensing, I mean, from what we talked about, is that commercial activity license. So you don't need to get any type of other, you know, license to sell produce or anything, or a farmer's market, whatever. If you're just selling it on your land and, you know, people are coming up and buying food from you, that's the only thing that you're gonna have to get, which is really great.
But let me ask you this. Once you are, your name, excuse me, once you buy that dollar lot and your name is associated with that lot, will you be billed like by the year for the taxes on the property?
Oh yeah, because you own it.
You own it, just like you own it.
Well, and you would do any taxes that you would get if you owned any property too.
Okay. That's sort of what I'm asking.
Yeah,
you know.
today we
Like
talked,
my house
yeah,
is
more
like
about
500 a year. So
what it costs to grow.
But if you have your neighbors, if they say like they say, if you have some neighbors, everybody paid $5. You know, you know, and trying to, you know, divide it into 300, something like that.
The lot's
It
about
won't cost
$200.
anything.
I think I'd pay you $105 for each of these.
okay.
So, Laura, what was that thing you did in Manny, that club? That fundraiser?
Oh, Mad River.
And then what, about $800? Okay, so one fundraiser, one night to help support the community garden, sent out tons of invites, had music.
We had people just donate to gift baskets.
Yeah, people donated things that you auctioned off, so they donate everything. Everything was donated. The bar charged how much when you walked in?
It was 30 to get in, and the bar took like 12 of that, and we kept the rest. And it was open bar for 2 hours, and then on top of
So
people
they didn't have
spending
to put
money
out
on
a
the
dime to
tickets.
do it. They just had to advertise and market it. And they walked away with $800, which paid taxes, paid for,
It paid for our application for our 501c3 IRS tax,
yeah, because that probably cost about $2 grand by the time everything was done.
but it helped.
But
For
it
that
helps
registration
soften the
fee.
blow of the cost.
So, but you know, if you did want to, you know, use the sidewalk or other sort of right of way for your sales, you would need to obtain the additional licenses from L&I. And if you wanted to set up a permanent store for selling food, that's a whole other story. You'd really need to contact both L&I and the health department to figure out what do those costs look like. So we're just talking like basic urban farming, you know, soil to hand, pretty much farming, and kind of what those numbers look like in profit. So.